to the current arrangements in place were due to expire before our next scheduled IJB in May. So, Derek, do you want to do the roll call first of all? Get us going?
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair. Just remind members that the public section of this meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the event. If all attendees can remember, have their cameras switched off if they don't want to appear in any recording, mute their microphone when not speaking, and camera and microphone should be switched on when you're invited to speak. If I can go through the roll call, Luann Grujon, you have confirmed your attendance with our discussion. Councillor Duncan?
Yes, good morning, Derek and everyone.
Good morning. Councillor Cook?
Good morning.
Morning. Councillor Bell?
Yes, present and correct, sir.
Councillor Leslie Dunbar?
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. Kim Crittenden?
Morning.
Morning. Alan Gray has indeed tendered initial apologies. John Tomlinson?
Yes, morning.
Morning. Sandra MacLeod?
Good morning.
Good morning. Alex Stephen?
Good morning.
Dr. Caroline Howarth? Dr. Malcolm Metcalf? Chris Littlejohn? Mike Adams?
Good morning.
Morning. Jenny Gibb?
Hi, everyone.
Morning. Jim Curry? Graham Simpson?
Morning, Derek.
Good morning. Maggie Hepburn has tendered apologies. Shona McFarlane?
Good morning.
Good morning. Alison Murray?
Good morning.
Good morning. Alan Chalmers? Angela Scott is here, I believe.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair. Kundai Sinclair is attending for Jess Anderson. Kundai?
Good morning.
That is you correct, and the membership accounted for, Chair.
Thank you, Derek. Can I just say on the matter of the cameras on or off, obviously it's total your personal choice, but it's really helpful for me if I can see faces. So if you're comfortable keeping your camera on, that would be helpful for me, so that I don't feel I'm cheering so much in the dark, and I can see you all, which is really helpful. So do we have declarations of interest for today? If people could let us know by raising their hands. I'm not seeing anyone noting anything. Okay, so we've got a single item today, which is Rosewell House. Just to confirm that we're taking that in public and there is no exempt business for this meeting. That correct, Derek?
Sorry, sticky microphone. Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We have the minutes from the board meeting of the 23rd of March. What I'm suggesting is that we defer that to our formal scheduled IJB meeting in May, where we can have where we can approve those minutes and discuss any matters arising, and we just focus today on Rosewell. So we'll note that. And then really just right into Rosewell House. Sarah, is it Sarah Gibbon that's going to introduce the paper for us? Over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I'll be speaking to the paper. Sarah Gibbon, project manager for Rosewell House. We also have Julie Warrender on the call with Fiona Mitchell-Hill, who is the transitional lead at Rosewell. The paper that's presented to you today is seeking a 16-week extension to the interim arrangements that were put in place in January of this year, which resulted in Rosewell opening with 40 NHS-led beds and 20 beds remaining under the Care Inspectorate registration. The current arrangements are due to expire on Sunday, the 9th of May, and this 16-week period will take us up until the 28th of August 2021. During this time, we're proposing that we undertake an options appraisal, which will help us take on some of the learning from this initial period and embed that into the long-term arrangements for Rosewell. And we're suggesting that we would be bringing this options appraisal back to the IJB for consideration at the start of July, which I believe is your next meeting. And then that would also be giving us the 2 months to work on implementing whatever recommendation is agreed at that meeting. I'd just like to open up for any questions on the paper.
Thank you, Sarah. So we'll just look for some hands coming up. Derek, sometimes I have a lag with hands, so if you're seeing people before me, if you could let me know.
Certainly, we've got Mike Adams.
Okay, I see Mike Adams, and then after Mike, there's John Cook.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. This has probably became more of a comment than it was originally going to be a question, because you have answered somewhat with the options appraisal. So I suppose because the advantage of the stuff that has went through the senior leadership team in the city means that the background is quite clear and has been discussed a lot. So that, for me, is good because it gives me that information for a staff side workforce. If you want a point of view, it would have been asking that, because totally get why there needs to be an extension. But it would have been asking, is there an exit strategy, or is this something that would be continually extended, or would we be looking at something that has to be some kind of permanent fixture, because that's what we need for that frailty pathway. So as I say, it's probably became more of a statement than a question, but yeah, I did want it sort of recorded that we were asking those things.
Thanks, Mike. Sarah, do you want to come back on that?
Was there any points, Mike, in particular you'd like me to come back on? I know you were saying it was more of a statement than a question.
No, not really. As I say, just the fact of the options, the appraisal, once we see it and comes back, we see if that contains, there might be more that we would ask at that point, but it was just to give you further thoughts were coming from at this moment in time, because yeah, it still looks at this moment in point again far you couldn't see how the frailty pathway would work without it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And I think it's our ambition for all of us is to get a permanent settled arrangement, which is obviously of benefit to staff and people using that facility. So we'll look at that and we'll note that in the minute, Mike. Thank you. John Cook.
Excellent. Really good paper, very supportive of what we're trying to do. Very happy with the recommendations around the facility. My only question is around the kind of knock-on effect on respite care facilities, which previously was one of the big things that was done at Rosewell. I've had a few comments from folks saying that the alternatives that we're providing, such as putting people in nursing homes, aren't ideal. So while I'm fully supportive of what we're doing at Rosewell, I just wondered if we could take a look at what we're doing in terms of respite care citywide more broadly.
Thanks, John. Sarah, do you want to come back on that?
I think Sandra's going to come in. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably easier to come in. So absolutely, John, appreciate the comments about with regard in saying that you know, that it was previously a respite there, but to be mindful, I suppose, that we've not had respite in Rosewell now for well over a year since it was stopped with regards to COVID. The other key part is that one of the reasons that Rosewell was a respite facility and was booked because of the lack of respite facilities across Aberdeen City. So we've very significantly changed where we are now compared to what we were in that position. So, for example, at this moment we have a considerable number of vacancies across Aberdeen City. It's also what we're also looking at is that, you remember the recall, the Stay Well and Stay Connected that we've brought through to the IJB, which quite clearly sets out how we would like to approach respite, how we want to look at different methods, different ways of working and different ways of keeping people connected. So at the moment, it is not the, we're looking at alternatives with the Stay Well, Stay Connected. We're looking at alternatives within other nursing homes, if you like, because Rosewell Mindful was a residential, well, care home without nursing at that point, and looking at different alternatives now for what people are looking for is in the whole system. So I don't think there is a loss for the respite not being available. It is still there in what way, shape and form we have been able to provide through COVID.
Yeah, I think it's I don't think it's a loss of total capacity. The comments I've had around the suitability of say a 50-year-old with some disabilities into a nursing home with some very elderly residents. And I totally get that you're having to juggle umpteen plates, particularly with COVID, and dealing with a kind of long-term capacity issue as well.
Yeah, I suppose that. Yeah.
Sorry,
so just to help you, to clarify on that, Rosewell was an older person's respite facility. It always has been. Its registration was for older people. It wasn't for which is generally classed as over 65s. So it wasn't. It might have taken one or two people under that, but that's not there. But as you suggest, there is a requirement, and I think we're in conversations with different commissioning approaches to how we look for respite facilities for people under 65. Because you're absolutely right. That is something within that we may well have a need for and do have a need for with more complex care, but Rosewell didn't fulfil that function prior to this.
No, that's helpful. So will we get something back to IGAB on respite care in due course? And as I say, I'm conscious of the fact that we're dealing with all the normal stuff plus COVID. So
yeah,
I get that you guys must be pretty much snowed under.
So no, the Stay Well, Stay Connected, that's the whole part about how all that fits with our respite, with our planned respite and our daycare. But I'm wondering if it may well be helpful, just with a specific focus, maybe have a conversation offline, if that would be helpful, just to maybe get Anne from a commissioning perspective, maybe to just have a chat with you and go through that just to help.
That'd be great, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we can certainly do that.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks Sandra, thanks John. I see John Tomlinson and then Sarah Duncan. John?
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the capacity in this. As I understand it, we've got 60 beds here, and the issue is about the balance between what's required, stepping up, stepping down. I just want to check out if the appraisal that you're going to do and report when you come back will look at the overall capacity needed, because I'm mindful of kind of normal times and pandemic times and whether you need greater flexibility and whether 60 or more is required here. So it's just to understand the parameters of your further investigation of this and what you're looking at around capacity.
I would definitely say that the capacity will be looked at through the options appraisal. It's also linking in with, I guess, the wider work around the frailty programme as well, and all the additional capacity with that programme of work going into sort of the hospital at home and the community AHP teams as well. So I can certainly make sure it's addressed in the paper that comes back to you in July.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Sarah. Sarah Duncan.
Thanks. Again, like Mike Adams, I've got a bit of a statement and then a question, and it follows on from what John's just said about capacity. My understanding when we made the decision in October was that this was to be a new model of integrated care, and that it was to avoid admissions from the community into hospital. Now, I absolutely understand that with COVID and the need to reduce people's stay in hospital, that we needed a step down facility for the frailty pathway. My concern reading the report is that the balance has skewed to this becoming a step down capacity, and that in my head I'm thinking actually we've just transplanted Ward 106 and Wood End into Rosewell, which was not the original intent of the facility and the agreement that we came to with Concord Care and the skill mix that we were seeking, which is why we were originally going down the care inspectorate registration model, because care inspectorate is a lower acuity of care needed rather than the NHS bed. So I absolutely agree with the need for the options appraisal. I think 12 weeks is the right amount of time to do it, notwithstanding the continuing uncertainty that this is going to be placing on the staff and the workforce. So I'm very glad to hear that Mike is comfortable with what we're doing from the staff side. But I would like some assurance that there's going to be concerted efforts taken to assess what the demand is for step up from the community and what is going to be done to promote awareness of Rosewell as a step up facility in the community. Who's that going to be done with? Just so when you come back in 12 weeks, we have had a proper period where we're assessing whether the integrated model to avoid admission to hospital in the first place actually has been tested properly.
Thanks, Sarah. I see Sandra and Alex have both got their hands up. I don't know who's wanting to come in.
I'll let Alex come in.
Alex, okay.
Yeah, it's a couple of bits. It probably touches on John's question as well, is that you know, we are considering what the demand's going to be for this facility going forward. I think, you know, during the COVID side of things, it was more you know, that it was more coming out of the hospital. We recognise that. We also recognise that may not be the way or that might not be our preference going forward around about that, but we need to do the options appraisal to actually find out what the demand is to take that. And I think the point John was making is an important one, because there may need to be some flex in that system. So there may need to be some flexibility in terms of either the numbers or how or what we use that for, depending on what the demand is in the system at that point in time. So a kind of flexible model might actually, you know, fit some of these criteria. So we certainly are looking at it, mindful about what's happened over the last wee while, and you know, that we won't lose sight of that in the option appraisal. I think it does mention within the report that, you know, the majority of the admissions were that way, but whether there'll be demand for that going forward, we don't know. We need to go and assess that and see where it lands from there.
Thank you, Alex.
Could I just come back on that?
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, so that's absolutely right, that we need to assess the demand. I suppose my fear is that Rosewell is now there, and you know, acute wards know that Rosewell is there and can take up to 40 people. So it will be really difficult to shift expectation in the system now about what Rosewell is about, unless concerted efforts are made to shift the understanding of what the facility is for and what the expectation is. And I'm fully supportive, I'm fully behind the whole system approach and the frailty pathway. But I'm worried that we are missing an opportunity here if we don't do the next 12 weeks properly and don't have proper evidence to assess all of the options in the options appraisal, rather than just the one that Rosewell has defaulted to over the last 3 months.
Sandra?
Can I come back on that, Julie? Yeah, it's a really good point. And I would say that can absolutely understand the concerns that have been voiced there. I suppose just to help with that understanding, one of the key parts, and I think as Sarah's paper outlines, is round about the organisational change. When we've moved the whole system, this has not just been a case of moving one, and I think Julie's on the call here, and Fiona, this has not just been a case of moving the wards from one area to another. However, there is a part in the degree of organisational change. It's taken quite a considerable planning with the frail elderly to understand where do we need to support the whole system, both in Rosewell and out Rosewell. So one of the key opportunities, for example, Aberdeenshire, you'll be aware, I know this, is a hosted service. We have responsibility right across the system. Although within Aberdeen City, the IGB has heavily invested in its hospital at home service, that's almost doubled in size now. It's moving forward. We've got heavily investment. We've invested heavily through the Granite Care City Consortium in our care at home. We've invested through Bon Accord in additionality. the locality models that things are moving. So there's a huge amount of work that is being done within the community to start to support that shift from inpatient to supporting people there. However, there are other parts of the system that is not as far ahead of us on that, and those parts of the system we've supported during that time. So we're well aware, and it is absolutely an integrated intermediate facility is what Rosewell's meaning, but just because we have moved that part of the system, we have to allow and support the rest of the system to be able to move with us. So not only are we looking at Aberdeen City and the capacity we need within the community to support people not having to come into hospital, we also have to look at Aberdeenshire. We have to look at what supports in Murray. We have to look at that from a consultant level. And then in addition, what we're also looking at and linking in now is to see what does that look like in an ARI footprint? What does medicine look like, and what is all that there? So I think what we're seeking is firmly on that ambition that this is an integrated facility. Ideally for us, it is about prevention of admissions and people moving forward and that whole ethos. But at this moment in time, we have to get people in the right place that they want to work in, and then help to move that model forward at the same time, build capacity of different bits of the system, shape different parts and keep it. But I suppose the assurance I would give the IGB is in no way has the team lost sight that this is an integrated intermediate facility, where the biggest push for us is step up care, not step down.
Thanks, Sandra. That's really helpful. Do we have any other comments or questions from folk today? I see a hand, but I can't see whose hand it is. Derek, could you see? Is there someone?
Yeah, we've got Angela Scott followed by Kim Cruttenden.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Luann. Just building on Councillor Duncan's points and Sandra's response, I wonder if it's possible to share with colleagues NHS Grampians remobilisation, because I guess what the paper doesn't do is to show that flow that's intended to go back as part of NHS Grampians remobilisation. So whether there's scope to share that now after this meeting, or whether that can be factored into the paper. But I think that would give the assurance that Councillor Duncan is seeking, Sandra.
Thanks, Angela. Sandra, I wonder if that's going to be possible. I'm just thinking of where the remobilisation plan is. I think there was to be a shortened version to be made available, because the full plan is pretty lengthy, but I'm not sure if that's been completed yet.
Yeah, I do wonder whether it's just picking up on, I mean, it's a good point to understand that wider bit that's going on within NHS Grampian about the remobilisation and the work that's getting done at the moment to test which parts of the system are ready for that. So there is work that we're undergoing at that, which is firmly workforce based, but as well as I do wonder about the Chief Executive of NHS Grampian, the 8th decade, the sharing of the videos and things like that. I wonder if there's a bit of a briefing that we could pull together with some key parts of that system for IGB. Is that what you were? Would that be helpful, Angela? Does that cover the point that you're raising? That maybe just does answer Sarah's point about that whole wider system.
Thank you, Sarah. I think if you were to take that longer perspective, I think that would probably move beyond the immediacy of what Councillor Duncan's seeking. I think that what Luann was suggesting in the granularity of the kind of mass of NHS Grampians remobilisation, I think there's understanding about in the acuity that's come out of ARI that's come into Rosewell, how much of that will go back narrowly within the next 12 weeks back into NHS, because I guess there's an interdependency on the remobilisation of NHS to Rosewell in terms of reducing that kind of step down, which is taking some capacity from the step up, which I think is the point that Councillor Duncan's making. And of course, NHS Grampians remobilisation is completely dependent on the flow that comes from the pandemic. So I guess that if an option appraisal is to come back following 12 weeks, what happens from NHS Grampians' impact on the flow over the next 12 weeks is critical in terms of, I think, Councillor Duncan's point, and sorry for speaking on your behalf, Councillor Duncan, you're more than able to do that. But I think just in terms of getting that demand back in. So what I'm hearing is wanting to know that the controls are in place through the NHS Grampians mobilisation to take that appropriate demand that's currently sitting in Rosewell back into NHS Grampian. So I think it's just the narrow focus on 12-week. I agree, NHS Grampian kind of resetting its strategy is about wholesale kind of fundamental shift. But I think in the context of this option appraisal, I think it'd be important to understand either immediately after this board meeting or when you bring the option appraisal paper back around what's happening for that step down. Otherwise, as Councillor Duncan says, will just become a permanent step down, and that wasn't the board's original decision. So it's just understanding, Sandra, what's likely to happen in the 12-week period as a consequence of NHSG's remobilisation, and what demand, step down demand, will that take back up into the acute system, and obviously what will be dispersed through care at home as well.
Thanks, Angela. Sandra?
Okay, yeah, I can come back on that. So I think to help clarify the points, I think it will take a bigger picture rather than just coming back immediately after this. Because what I'm very conscious of is that one of the other interdependencies is that as NHS Grampian remobilises, and that's one of the key things, I think we're doing work with all of our commission services at the moment, is, for example, if orthopaedic elective surgery decides to step up, which it's a way to start doing because there'll be pressure on backlog and waiting lists. We know, for example, that for elective surgery in some of our early figures suggest that there's about a 10% increase now, about 3 to 4% increase in our care at home capacity. So we need to be able to plan for that. If we're planning for our care at home capacity to be about preventing people coming into hospital, but we also have to plan for our care at home capacity being about being able to step up all the elective capacity, we're in a very, which is what areas are ready for this. And that all of it is interconnected, and what we're starting to understand from the modelling that's came out through COVID and the modelling that we're pushing forward at the moment. I'm really keen to understand that the remobilisation, as you will be as well, the remobilisation of NHS Grampian on the elective, as particularly about planned care, their waiting lists and their waiting times, could inadvertently, if we are not really mindful and engaged in that, impact on our ability to shift that from being a step down back to a step up, because we won't have that capacity within community. So that's our fundamental, that we're working with our commission services at the moment to understand how ready they are, what part we've got for growth, and then having a look at that wider system. So I do think you're right, and I absolutely take on board that as part of this coming back, we need to understand that narrative, but it's, at this moment we're working our way through quite a few of that. So yeah, really helpful for us to explain that in the paper that's.
Oh, we've lost you, Sandra, but I think we got the end of what you were saying. Yeah. Okay, so we'll make sure that's incorporated into the paper. I'll do a sum up at the end once people are finished with comments and questions. I see Kim's hand up.
Yes, thank you. I think most of the points have been made, but generally supportive that no more time is needed, definitely to be sure of the plan for Rosewell going forward. It's just with knowledge of the system, just to reiterate some things around, concern around, the capacity and capability of the system to work in this step up, step down optimally, because the reality is it's not COVID now that's affecting these beds, it's the capacity within the acute service and the reduction of beds, and that pressure which exists throughout the year. There's obviously a seasonal shift, but generally that pressure is significant. And I suppose wrapped in with that, I think there's still 10 beds at Rosewell that aren't open, that are still closed. Is that right? And I think it says in the paper due to staffing issues. So wrapped in with that, do we think it's likely that we're going to be able to open these beds, because that may give you some step up capacity? But wrapped in with that is the uncertainty for staff in this period, and as Sandra said, there are gaps within the system, within the city, within the NHS. There are gaps for qualified staff and others to go to. I just got some concerns around. I think the comms around this has been good. It's been very, very good with staff, but just when there is uncertainty as to what it will look like in the end, it's whether there will be a further reduction in staff and whether those beds will ever open. I don't know if we've really got a feel for that at the minute, because that certainly would change things around just a bit.
thank him. Yeah, really helpful comments. Angela, your hand's still up. Did you want to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Luann. Sandra, that was a really helpful descriptor, the way that you shared that. I guess what it left for me, just in building on Kim's points and Mike's chat as well, just around, you're indicating in the paper to come back within sort of is it 12 or is it 16 weeks? Just curious around whether actually that is the right time frame, or whether this needs to be a bit longer or a bit shorter. So I wondered if you could just comment about the proposed timeframe, I guess, against the backdrop of NHSG's remobilisation, and take the point that Kim was making. We could just switch demand from ARI for one purpose from another, and we could just get caught in that spiral and never move to the redesign that we had imagined. So could you just offer some comment just about the proposed timeframe for bringing the paper back, Sandra?
Yeah, absolutely. So the time frame is based on our ability for our staff to be through the organisational change policy and process. That's one of the indicators of the time. So that will allow us at the end of that period is to know which staff we have in which areas. So, for example, some people will be choosing to be in Rosewell, others will be choosing to be in the ARI. There's opportunities within community, and that's to allow us to have that starting point. The 10 beds, Kim's absolutely right, they're not open at the moment because of staffing, but fundamentally everyone's thought processes on there is that we link those with hospital at home, and they will be our step-up beds. And I think that's the desire. I think Fiona and Julie will be able to support on that. So there is that time frame as well. You're right, there's a lot of complexities in the system. The work that's been done just now with our commission services, that's been done with NHS Grampian on the whole of the services about how ready are we all for remobilising. That's all been done within the next 2 or 3 weeks, so we'll have an understanding about how ready people are to mobilise. Then the different pathways that are going, we should be able to have an understanding. The intent is that of the time frame was, we feel that there is a need for staff to have some degree of stability within the system to understand what they're working for. The model will not be, I don't think we will be in an end point come August. I think where we will be is that we will know the structure of the legislation, if you like, the regulation, not the legislation, the regulation that we will be working to, which will help design the models moving forward, because that again is a key part about how we'll progress that forward. So it's knowing where our staff will be. That was one part of the timing. The other part is to help the staff so that they're so that we can help people move forward through this period of change. We can then start to develop each of the areas that we've got with the teams that will be around that. The key part at the end of that about the options appraisal is, I suppose fundamentally, there's what does the regulatory environment need to look like for us to then start to move forward to that real redesign that we're looking for. Is the redesign firmly within a care home, or as some of the parts that we're learning is actually for redesign and flexibility, is it to remain as an NHS facility? I think that's a key part of the options appraisal that we're looking at the moment as well. How will we get the most redesign? How will we get the most moving forward to step up step up care? Yeah. Sorry, Angela, I see your hand. I'm not sure if I've answered that. I've got colleagues on the call who may be able to.
You did, and I'm sure trade union colleagues in particular are very appreciative of the consideration that you're given to impact on staff on the time frame. So you know that's helpful. I guess I'm still curious around, and whilst obviously that's an important driver, there's also an important driver around our service users as well. So in terms of the option appraisal coming to the IGB board in July, as distinct from the kind of the communication to staff about the expiry of the model and so on in the way you described, what are the critical factors, or what's the critical information that we need to know to enable the board to make a decision in July, and will we have that? And I guess that comes back to the interdependency on NHS Grampian's mobilisation plan, Scottish Government's kind of plans as well. So I'm just trying to establish whether, I know we can't get perfect information, but if we're going to make the decision in July, then will we by July have all the relevant information for the board to make the decision on the model. I think you are asking the board to give a lot of continuity to staff and stability by asking the board to extend the temporary measure, and you are giving a lot of certainty through recommendation 1 to approve the interim arrangement. But so I think you've answered that point, but my key bit's probably about the 7th of July. Will we have all the relevant factors that will influence? So Councillor Duncan's earlier point about understanding the demand for the step up, will we have all of that information in order to confirm what's the right decision to make on the 7th of July? That's what I'm trying to understand, because I guess that if we don't have that, then are you maybe looking for flexibility in that recommendation? If you don't have the right information for the board to make the decision on 7th of July, is it worth seeking some flexibility from the board today to then say that in the event you don't have it for July, that we then bring that back in August? And I understand there's lots of complexity. Of course, you've got all the regulatory environment, but it's just trying to be really clear about what information will be critical for the board in July, and will you have that, Sandra? Sorry if that wasn't, if I haven't explained that well.
Sorry, can I come back? I think actually that feels a very pragmatic suggestion for me, and does give us a degree of scope that rather than have to have an emergency one. So yeah, that feels very sensible from my point of view. So I would be keen if the board is minded to have that flexibility. Thank you.
That's been a really helpful discussion. So we can look to amend the first recommendation around the timescales so that there is that target, but there's flexibility around that, so that you don't have to come back and ask for a little bit more of an extension. We can think of what's going to be the most appropriate wording to support the process. Sarah.
Yeah, it's just on the timing back to this board. My view, having heard this discussion, and I'm sorry I've kicked off a more detailed discussion about this today than you were probably expecting, but I think it's important that we're all clear what the context is and what the inhibitors and what the motivators are for getting us to the best place for Rosewell, and the best place for Rosewell for winter 21-22 might be a very different place to that which we envisaged it being for 2021. I think that's what I'm picking up from this conversation today. I am very struck also by Sandra's comment that a lot of the dependencies are based on the remobilisation, and Kim's comments about the remobilisation and the pace of that in ARI, which might also change the customer base for Rosewell, if we want to put it like that. I'm not convinced, I have to say, that we're going to see any of that really by middle of June, which is when you start having to write your report for the July IJB. Not that far away from it. It's not 12 weeks we're giving you to do the options appraisal because of the timings of reports back to the IJB. And it's not the sort of thing that you can do in a rush to make sure that it's the right time. So my view is that actually we should just report this back in August. That gives you proper 12 weeks to do the options appraisal with more data on where the remobilisation from ARI is going and how that is going to impact on the customer base for Rosewell. Rather than saying now, we'll come back in July and then having a panic in June about it, let's just give you the right time. Let's just give you to August. Come back on.
Thanks, Sarah. We can have a think about the exact wording at the end. There's a few people's hands are still up. I see Mike and then John Cook.
Okay, just on the back of that, and I have to go by, again, obviously being involved in the remobilisation, the NHS Grampian. So on here, because of changes that keep happening and bumps that happen or government instruction, etc., then in technical terms, the chances of you having are the information you need by that time, I would bet, as I say, in technical terms, wouldn't count on it. It's a changing, moving feast, if you want, and we a lot of stuff still that we won't know. It's going to be difficult I think, to pinpoint exactly when you would enough. You might get an idea, but even that might change. It's just being realistic on. It does count a lot for NHS Grampians mobilisation, but we have got a lot of work still to do on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yeah, there's huge complexity clearly here. Sandra, did you want to come in on Mike's point?
Yeah, thank you. And I suppose it's just to raise awareness for the board. I think the key bit about, while I understand we have NHS Grampian and the ERI's mobilisation plan, the biggest bit for us that we're taking into consideration is our commission services. So within Aberdeen City, all of our care at home is commissioned, all of our care homes are commissioned. We don't have any of those as in-house services. We know that any mobilisation that takes place from ERI will impact on our commission services. And what I'm not quite clear of, and I think that's the work that really needs done on the mobilisation within NHSG, is to share that understanding with our consultants and things in specialties, that they understand that they can mobilise as fast if they like, but all that will happen is we will end up with delayed discharges because we do not have the capacity in community, within primary care, within all of that. So I would agree with you, Mike. It is fundamentally about looking at that whole wider system, and totally, I'm very appreciative of the board suggested that we get some more time for this.
Good. John Cook.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say I very much agree with the points that Sarah was making in terms of we need more time, we need more information, because while no decision is ever taken on the basis of perfect information, the goalposts are just moving far too much, I think. So more time, I think, is needed. A question that do we need to, if we're going to do a 16-week extension, do we need to make it for longer? Given that we might, if we're looking at something in, say, August, is that going to be too close to the end of the 16-week extension?
Thanks, John. That's kind of where my mind was going. Alex, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think you would be looking at that, but I would just remind the board that that's a kind of, in partnership with Bonaccord Care. So, we've obviously done some work in terms of seeing how they felt about 16 weeks. So if we did decide to extend it, then, we need to go back to them and see how that felt with them, given we're working in partnership on this one. But I don't think it'll be something that'll hold it up. I just think we need to maybe think about in the word and how we give Bonaccord Care their place as a key partner in this project.
Thanks, Alex. A really important point. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands up. I've taken a few notes, just I suppose for Sarah and colleagues who will be doing the report back. So what I'm hearing today from colleagues is that there's agreement for the way forward and support for the extension. We're keen that what comes back is a paper which gets us closer to a permanent arrangement, which is our intent around that being an integrated facility which prevents admission to hospital. But it's unlikely that there's going to be a very clear endpoint in August. I think the redesign will continue beyond then. Really important in the paper that it's laid out evidence about what the demand is for both step up and step down, and how, what information can be provided on that. And also the really important bit about how Rosewell as a facility fits into the wider picture, both from what's coming, the ARI bit, but also really importantly, what's available in community. Care at home was mentioned, but there's lots of others. So I think seeing the Rosewell offering in the wider picture is going to be really important. And I suppose making sure that that options appraisal really demonstrates the links with the other parts of the system. Listening to all the complexity, I'm reflecting that the one thing that's certain is uncertainty ahead. We can't really predict what's going to be needed. So I think it would be important to be able to demonstrate in whatever is proposed that it is a flexible, integrated model that can ebb and flow with COVID, winter pressures, changes elsewhere in the system. That's really going to be a key to the success of this model. So it would be really important to be able to demonstrate the model that's being proposed and how it can be flexed up and down according to the changing needs of the system. Yeah, and I think all the other points have been covered well. And then there's the time frame. I think we should be looking, we'll come to the recommendations. I think if we change the recommendation that the Chief Officer, recommendation C, if we start with at the bottom and work back, we instruct the Chief Officer to present the options appraisal and recommendations to the IJB in August, would be my suggestion. We've given some detail about recommendation B, but I think it still stands. Maybe it's about based on the agreed intent for Rosewell, maybe would be something to be really clear there. And then A, I wonder if it could say approves the extension for interim arrangements at Rosewell for the further period to allow the options appraisal to be full options appraisal to be delivered. Would that work? Sarah Gibbon?
I was just thinking that perhaps if we're extending when the options appraisal is going to be presented, we need to extend the time as well, so that there's a kind of period where we can implement it.
Yeah.
It's because I built sort of 8 weeks in after the IJB in July.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we need to be, is it helpful to be specific on recommendation A? And make that 24 weeks, or could we just say for a further period to allow the options appraisal to be completed?
Chair, may I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
If you amend, I've put it in the text chat, and I'll draw your attention, there is some text chat in there from other members as well. But for suggestion for option C, I'm suggesting present an update on the development and progression of the option appraisal to the IJB on the 7th of July, and thereafter present the full options appraisal to the board on the 24th of August. That would save you having to extend the option A timeline, which Alex has mentioned would need some work with One Accord Care, but would still allow you a period of time to readdress that time extension if it was needed on the 7th of July.
Can I come in here? I think it's important, bearing in mind Alex's point about partners, that actually we need to give One Accord Care certainty here. There are all sorts of legal arrangements underpinning this and the use of Rosewell. So actually, I think we do need a time in A. And I think it should be 24 weeks. So we get that period beyond the IJB decision to then implement whatever decision the IJB makes in August. So I think what we're agreeing to do today becomes less acceptable to partners if we were making it open-ended. And I actually don't think that's the right way to proceed. I think we have to give partners certainty about timescales when decisions are going to be made. And that is recommendation A that does that.
That extends that. Kundai?
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I was just going to say that I would agree with Councillor Duncan's point that from a legal standpoint, it would be really good to have a specific timescale put in from when the interim arrangement will lead up to. So it would be something more specific than an open-ended suggestion. That would be great.
Okay, thank you, Kundai. Thank you, Sarah. That's really helpful. Alex?
Yeah, sorry, I've not got the exact word on this, but I'm sure as a group we can all jump in here and try and get something sorted out. But I'm thinking on number one is that you approve the extension of the interim agreement in place at Rosewell for a further 16 weeks ending 28th of August. And then there's a bit on the end of there about and approves a further extension of 8 weeks until whatever date that comes, subject to discussion and agreement with One Accord Care. How would that suit to get that forward and move that, close that one down?
Thanks, Alex. I think that's a really excellent suggestion, and it gives One Accord Care their place in this, which is really important for us too. So Yeah, are people happy with that as the first recommendation for us to approve today? So that's approves the extension of interim arrangements at Rosewell House for a further period of 16 weeks ending 28th of August, and approves a further 8-week extension subject to Bon Accord care. I don't know what the final bit of your word in there, Alex, was, but
I think it was agreement or approval.
Yeah, agreement. Yeah. Okay, are people happy with that as the first recommendation? Yeah, I'm seeing nodding heads. Okay. And the second recommendation doesn't really change. Instructs the Chief Officer to commission an options appraisal to identify the most appropriate delivery mechanism for the integrated model at Rosewell House, bearing in mind all the comments that have come back from people this morning. So people happy with that? Yeah, okay, nodding heads, thank you. And then the final one, Alex, what do we want to say in recommendation C? What would be your advice there?
I think I would just move the date to the date that it was going to come back, which is the August meeting. Would be my recommendation. But I think it just needs a change of date. But unless you wanted to add anything else extra, and I think it's the 24th of August 2021 where we is the actual date of the next IGB, or the IGB in August. Sorry.
Thanks, Alex. I think that keeps it simple and straightforward. So we can change the date. So the recommendation will now read, instructs the Chief Officer to present the options appraisal and recommendations to the IGB at its meeting on the 24th of August. Yeah. People happy with that? Okay. Nodding heads. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Any other points or comments anyone would like to make on the Rosewell paper this morning? All right. I'm not seeing anyone coming in. So that just leaves me to say thank you again very much for your contributions and for your attendance this morning. Next IGB meeting is on the 25th of May, but there's lots of seminars and different activities before then, so we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.